Hello and welcome to episode 591 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. As always, joined by Evan Silva. Today we have a very, very special guest. He spends his youth locked in a film room watching the hip swivel of NFL wide receivers. He's somehow close personal friends with Austin Ekeler. He's owned a niche in this space, which you guys know I always love. It is indeed Matt Harmon of Yahoo Sports and Reception Perception. Matt, how's it going today?
What up, boys? Yeah, it's good to talk to you guys as it is every year. I don't know that I feel like I'm spending my youth doing this anymore. At this point now, I've been, which is crazy to say, been doing Reception Perception, at least like putting the process together for 10 years, just a little under 10 years. So I feel like my youth has passed me by, but yes. I do feel very excited about the process still and doing this every single year.
You've lost your youth is what you're trying to say. The youth is gone. 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Love having
my hair's gone. It's all gone, man. Yeah. So
it's all gone. Evan, how's it going today?
It's going great. Ready to jump into this. Let's just pepper Matt Harmon with dudes and get takes. I wanted to give him a shout out for he really sent up the caution flags last year for Gabe Davis, and at the end of the day, I think we kind of agreed that the situation might be good enough to propel Gabe Davis, but it really wasn't. And so I don't know. Hopefully we can get another Gabe Davis take from Matt Harmon because he was the one really pumping the brakes on Gabe Davis last year, really more than anyone, I would say.
For sure. We are going to talk about Gabe Davis here today. He is indeed on the list. The reason I love Matt's stuff, though, is like, try not. I always, people ask me for advice all the time. I always say, try not to be an expert in everything. And Matt has done the work to be an expert in something very specific, wide receiver ability. So on today's show, we're going to discuss a bunch of wide receivers with what we thought were somewhat interesting profiles. And then we'll also get Matt's take on some guys he disagrees with the market on. Be sure to stay tuned to the end to hear that. Before you get into it, if you are playing best ball and or regular season-long fantasy football and you plan to play DFS this season, you should really act now on our early bird bundle. Combines Draft Kit Pro with in-season for an absurdly low price. Guy sent me a note yesterday saying we need to double the price because the information is too valuable. I forwarded that to Silva and got no response. Anyways, we move on. All right, let's get into it here, Matt. And, a lot of times when these guys go in the first round, these wide receivers go in the first round, there's not a lot of questions around them, right? We know they're good. We know the situation is good. I have some questions around Stefon Diggs, just in the fact that 2 out of the last 3 years, he was not great from a production standpoint, especially down the stretch last year. I still think Stefon Diggs is awesome. He's still my number 8 overall player. I want to feel good about this. Basically, I'm just asking for a pep talk on Stefon Diggs here. Any takes on what happened down the stretch last year with him and his outlook going forward?
I feel like a lot of the questions just generally around the Bills offense have to be kind of considered with the fact that, Josh Allen's playing with an elbow injury last year. They're trying to kind of find themselves with a new offensive coordinator. I do think the one thing you can, and I look, if we want to like play the mind games with Stefon Diggs and like the Instagram stories with Stefon Diggs and everything, I've got a couple theories in terms of like what was, kind of irritating him to the point that there was, this frostiness all throughout the offseason. A lot of it was, like you said, how they finished. I think that there were times last year where they got away from Diggs early in games and, because he's double covered a ton. Evan knows I talk about this a lot, that double coverage doesn't, exist as much as we think it does, as much as people talk about it. But Diggs is one of these guys that every single year since he's been in Buffalo, he's been one of the highest in reception perception in terms of his percentage of routes doubled. I think they'd get away from Diggs early in games and then kind of like, oh, shoot, we're in the fourth quarter of this Bills game or this Bengals game. We need Diggs to like bail us out on these low percentage throws. And, nobody's better at low percentage throws than Josh Allen is. He's great at pushing the ball vertically. He's great in those situations, but they're still nevertheless low percentage routes, low percentage throws. I think that was a big part of it. But, Diggs in general, I mean, there's literally no drop off in his game. Last year in reception perception, 97th percentile success rate versus man, 96th against zone, 96th against press. He still owns the highest reception perception success rate versus man coverage score in series history from his first season with the Buffalo Bills. I think he's a top 5 receiver in the NFL right now. Set it and forget it. Ranking receivers is hard, Nobody knows that better than me, but I still think he's a top 5 guy and is playing at the height of his powers and has game that I think should age pretty well. So, I think that there was probably I think they just need other dudes and other concepts in this offense to step up and take a little bit of heat away from Diggs so that they don't have to go through him in such low percentage situations.
And they know that. And that's why, after that wide receiver run happened in the draft, they were like, hey, let's go get the best pass catcher that we possibly can. They trade up for Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah. My take is that I like having a top 8 pick in this year's fantasy draft because I include Steph Diggs as the 8th guy. There has been FUD out there from a lot of people, though, that don't think Steph Diggs should be going that high. I'm sticking with Steph Diggs at 8 overall. I think the 9th pick is actually the worst pick to have in fantasy this year. And so, yeah, Diggs to me would be the 8th guy there. I'm glad I got the pep talk from Matt. Okay. We know Garrett Wilson is very good at football, offensive rookie of the year, despite some pretty bad quarterback play last year, still put up numbers, still won offensive rookie of the year. You have to pay a lot in fantasy right now to get your hands on Garrett Wilson. We're talking 1-2 turn, early 2nd round. That makes me a little queasy. I want to be in on these year 2 wide receivers, though. What did you see out of Garrett Wilson's year 1?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of both Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and I was a fan of those guys coming into the NFL, and Drake London too, who I'm also really big on going into this year, despite some of the concerns about the Falcons offense. I think the guy's just a stone cold baller. But man, with Garrett Wilson, I think the biggest positive indicator from his reception perception profile in his rookie year that paints him as like a future superstar in the league is his 81.2% success rate versus press coverage in his rookie year. The following guys in their rookie year have hit 80% success rate versus press in reception perception history: CeeDee Lamb, Michael Thomas, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Odell Beckham. And now you can put Garrett Wilson in that club. That's a pretty good list. That's some pretty good company to be keeping there. So I think Wilson, it is wheels up for him. I think he is a future superstar in the league. Like I said, I love him and Olave both kind of like right next to each other. And I just think Garrett Wilson has all of the yak ability that we get excited about, kind of these gadgety players when we see them. He can do that stuff, but he's a true route runner. He can beat press coverage. He can beat zone coverage, man coverage, win on those in-breaking routes. Like his slant route success rate is really high. His dig route success rate is really high. And that I think is going to be a natural overlap with Aaron Rodgers, who used to hit those plays a ton to Davante Adams in Green Bay. And he really did not have a guy like that last year with the Packers. So that overlap
and
there.
Jordy Nelson before Davante Adams too.
Great point. Yeah, Jordy Nelson before him. And I think that is just going to be a natural connection, those two guys. I'm not concerned about, like Rodgers and Wilson getting their chemistry down. I think their games really overlap with each other, especially where Rodgers is at this point in his career.
Yeah. I mean, I like where Evan has Garrett Wilson ranked. The problem, though, is Evan at 18 overall where you have him. And I like that 18 overall. You're just not going to get him. Like he goes every draft.
I never get him.
Yeah. Every draft I do, he goes, 11, 12, 13, 14, something like that. And so I like having him 18 overall. That's really, really high, but you're still not going to get him. So it's just a point that how expensive Garrett Wilson is. But yeah, love to hear it.
The big concern for me is,
Evan, who do you like better, Garrett Wilson or St. Brown this year?
St. Brown. I think I have one spot ahead of him. Yeah.
I juggle those two a lot back and forth.
I have them right in the same tier right next to each other,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which one of those two guys I like more, because St. Brown, we talked about him on the show last year. Big fan of his ability to beat zone coverage as a rookie. He still maintained that ability in his second year, but now we saw him last year take a near 10% jump in his ability to beat man press coverage in his second year. And, that puts him more towards, like, I think last year I called him Bud Light Cooper Kupp. That puts him more towards like Bud Heavy Cooper Kupp, right? If he's going to actually beat man press coverage and win in the intermediate areas. Like he could have a 1,200 yard, 12 touchdown season this year. But so could Garrett Wilson. So that's why I struggle with those two guys.
Yeah, I'm on Ross St. Brown ahead because I just haven't projected for more volume. That's really the big concern for me with Garrett Wilson, not his efficiency or anything like that, is the volume. They're going to have a really good defense in all likelihood. They'll probably have a pretty good running game. And I think I'm on Ross St. Brown projects for 15, 20 more targets, and that's the difference for me.
All right. In the middle rounds, you start to get into guys that there are more questions around. I want to start with Big Mike Williams. They still have Josh Palmer. They added Quentin Johnston. Big Mike Williams had the back issue that caused him to miss the playoff game last year. Big Mike Williams goes, you know, in the 40s, 50s, somewhere around there in most drafts. I know he's been in the league a long time. I know we have a lot of data on him. It's still hard for me to get my head around what kind of routes they should be using him on, because in the narrative in my head, Matt, Kellen Moore is going to be more vertical. Justin Herbert's going to be more vertical. That should be better for Mike Williams. What do you think about Mike Williams with Kellen Moore?
Yeah, I think Mike Williams has always been kind of profiled as a guy that gets no separation, because we see him with these big time downfield contested catch plays, you know, the red zone stuff. And I think he probably is, when he's healthy, maybe the best jump ball receiver in the NFL outside of the elite tier of wide receivers. But yeah, I think the routes you really want him, you can get him on some crossing routes for sure. You can get him on some like intermediate dig routes and stuff like that. But yeah, pushing the ball vertically, he does get separation on 9 routes, on corner routes, some post routes a little bit too. So I think his ability as a vertical receiver is kind of key to this offense. And we, you know, I know we might talk Quentin Johnston later too. He's certainly a guy that's going to be key, but I think the key with this Chargers receiver core right now is actually Keenan Allen. You know, one thing I say all the time with reception perception, I'm pretty confident like projecting guys year over year. The one thing I'm always kind of concerned about is when there's a slight drop off with these veteran receivers, is that like a blip, or is it you know, the cliff is impending? And I think with Keenan Allen, we've already kind of seen the cliff. And I know obviously he had a hamstring injury last year, but we're talking about a guy that from 2015 to 2020, every single year in reception perception, 77.3 to 77.6% to 76.6% success rate versus man, metronomically consistent and like near elite separator. And then in 21, he drops to 74.2, and last year 66.9%. That's a pretty big drop off. And I feel like Keenan Allen at this point has to exclusively play from the slot, exclusively be a zone beater. And because of that, I think guys like Mike Williams and Quentin Johnston are even more important. I've been kind of a little, which pains me to say this, guys. I love Keenan Allen. He's one of my favorite route runners of the last like 10 years. But because we've seen that drop off, I've been kind of below consensus on Keenan, slightly above consensus on Mike Williams, and same thing with Quentin Johnston as well.
Yeah, we've been higher than market on Mike Williams throughout this draft process. I think the thing about Keenan is that you need so much volume. When your ADOT is like 6 yards or 7 yards, you need so much volume to get there. They add Quentin Johnston. Mike Williams is healthy. They still have Josh Palmer and Eckler. And so, you know, if you're not getting 10, 11, 12 targets a game when you're Keenan Allen, it's going to be hard to pay it off in the 3rd round. I still think he's okay there, but yeah, there's definitely some risk.
Yeah. And Keenan Allen, in addition to the decline in reception perception, winning against coverage, his yards per route run has dropped in like 5 consecutive seasons. He's like firmly now on the wrong side of 30. And I think the expectation is that the ADOT for Justin Herbert is going to go up, moving from Joe Lombardi to Kellen Moore. And that benefits Mike Williams, who's the downfield threat. Keenan Allen is going to run all those short ADOT, all that short ADOT stuff. And I don't know, it'll be interesting to get your take on Quentin Johnston, because I feel like the scouting community take on Quentin Johnston was that he's more of a run after catch guy than a downfield ball winner.
Go ahead on Quentin Johnston now while we're here, Matt.
Yeah, obviously, like in reception perception, I track their ability to win out in space. You know, he broke multiple tackles on 14.3% of his in-space attempts. He's, you know, a guy that only went down on first contact on, you know, a very, very low percentage of those plays. He is a tackle breaker for sure. He's going to bring that ability. Although I think actually if he's going to hit his ceiling in the NFL, he's not going to be a yak guy. He's going to have to be a downfield player. And look, certainly you can pick nits at Quentin Johnston about his ball skills. I mean, like, come on, extend your hands like a little bit more often when you're this big body. That is certainly something that was an issue, but the routes that he was successful on, and like his success rate versus zone coverage was very poor, 12th percentile among college prospects, but 85th percentile success rate versus man. And I think some of that speaks to he's not there technically from a nuance standpoint yet. You know, he's coming from kind of not a full Looney Tunes Tennessee offense, but a pretty gimmicky type strip down offense there in TCU. He's probably not there as a technician yet, but he can separate against man coverage. 85th percentile success rate versus man, 74.8%. And it's on a small handful of routes. It's the corner route, it's the 9 route, it's the slant route, but it's pretty similar to like Christian Watson last year as a rookie. And I kind of think that he'll play that type of role where maybe he's not all the way up to speed in the first 4 weeks. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if Josh Palmer, who I'm not a fan of Josh Palmer. I'm not a big fan of his game, but if he is playing over Quentin Johnston in the first 4 weeks, but then Quentin Johnston is like the receiving core MVP in the final 8 weeks of the season. So I don't mind drafting him in best ball. With traditional redraft leagues, I typically try to like get those guys later in the season than in your early drafts or anything like that. But yeah, I think I could kind of go either way on Quentin Johnston, whether he's going to be like a super successful NFL player or if he's more of just a role player. But I do think he's got a lot of potential to be what this Chargers offense needs.
Sure. And that's the arc for a lot of wide receivers, the one that Matt just described.
Yeah, that's like Leone's expectation for Quentin Johnston. Like is exactly, it's like a replica of what Harmon just explained.
Yeah. Okay. A controversial one is Jerry Judy, because the Broncos offense was so broken last year. It was actually hard for me to have a lot of takeaways. Late in the year, though, Jerry Judy, I thought, actually played really, really well. There were trade rumors around Jerry Judy. Nothing materialized. There were trade rumors around Courtland Sutton. Nothing materialized. The market is massively in on Jerry Judy now. I mean, he goes, 38th, 39th, 40th overall in a lot of these drafts. Matt, is Jerry Judy actually worthy of that star level kind of ADP?
I don't know, man. This is probably, in terms of early drafts, the ADP that makes me the most nervous is Jerry Judy. I remember coming on the show last year and like kind of raising skepticism about this whole Broncos receiving core and if it was as good as people thought it was going to be. And Judy is still in that bucket. Now, I think he's the best receiver on this roster, but I also don't think Courtland Sutton is like totally dust. I don't think Tim Patrick is totally dust. I think Marvin Mims, like Sean Payton told you all you need to know about Marvin Mims and what he thought about him when he traded up for him. And I like Marvin Mims as a prospect. My problem with Jerry Judy is that through 3 years in the NFL, I think he has been wildly inconsistent as a player. And I think he's kind of leveled off as a route runner. He had a really good success rate versus man and press coverage in his rookie season. I think that has ticked down. And the year before last, you could write it off to the high ankle sprain. And he still like deals with injuries all the time too. But last year, he still got a pretty decent success rate versus man, 70.6%. His success rate versus zone is 68.4%. That's a 5th percentile score. And again, you could chalk some of that up to bad coaching, bad route concepts, all you want, but you don't fall to the 5th percentile without being an inconsistent player yourself. Like nobody does that. So I think that Judy is not really a true, like, I don't think there's a true one on this offense still. I don't think Judy has the potential to be that player. Like, I don't think he stinks, but I think he's more of a 2. And the fact that this is going to be a run heavy team, there's still a lot of like mouths to feed on this offense. Maybe not any star caliber guys, but all like slightly below average to maybe average starting players around Jerry Judy. There's a lot of mouths to feed. The quarterback, we still have questions about. Like, and I know that he's got impressive, points per game results. I know he's got impressive yards per route run against man coverage. He's not any good against zone coverage, though. That's kind of the problem. That stuff like doesn't move the needle for me when the offense stinks. And the Denver offense did still stink for the most part last year. It's like he had 100 yards when they get blown out 50-something points to 14 against the Rams. It just doesn't move the needle as much for me when the film doesn't back it up. And I feel like the film doesn't back it up with Jerry Judy.
We're 5 spots below market in our rankings on Jerry Judy now. We've come up a little bit on Courtland Sutton now. Evan, I know you've had takes about Broncos wide receivers, and they have a lot of mouths to feed for an offense that I'm still not sure is going to be very good. And that was like kind of the concern for me last year. They had so many guys, and now they're talking about playing Dulcich in the Joker role, and they have Pirine in the pass game. And obviously they've traded up for Marvin Mims. KJ Hamler's going to be back soon. Patrick can play. Sutton, Judy. It's a lot.
Yo, that is a freaking huge jug of water right there, dude. Holy.
That's your bit, Evan.
Dude,
it's classified as a weapon in all the in few states, not the ones I moved to, though. So, there is that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in on Jerry Judy. I have him as the wide receiver 20. I think that if you look at the complexion of the Denver receiver core, he projects as and look, I'm still kind of leaning on the post-college evaluation because he's dealt with all this lower leg stuff. But I think that if you look at the complexion of the Denver pass catcher core, Jerry Judy, to me, best profiles as the high volume receiver. And that's kind of what I've been leaning on. I've also been leaning on, no Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah.
Sean Payton is, one of the best offensive minds of all time. They try to trade Courtland Sutton. They gave Jerry Judy with like a $14 million. They picked up his $14 million option for next season. You know, so I don't know. I'm leaning on a number of data points here, but I mean, I would not be opposed to moving him down because I definitely think that Matt Harmon makes some good points there.
All right, let's keep it moving here to Christian Watson, which was a tough one. Everybody knew he's coming to the league really raw last season as a rookie from FCS. Was incredibly efficient down the stretch last year. I mean, big play after big play for Christian Watson. Now he gets the quarterback change, but I'm curious how good you think Christian Watson is. Forget about the quarterbacks for a second. How good do you think Christian Watson actually is?
Yeah, I'm still a little torn on this one. He's another guy that has like incredible, per route efficiency stuff. And I do think he's a good player. Like I think I compared him to Martavis Bryant coming into the NFL, and I think he was basically Martavis Bryant last year. You look at his
incredible because that's my comparison for him too.
I mean, I think we're not. Like, I think a few people have it.
Oh, do they? Okay. I mean, he looks freaky out there at times, just like Martavis used to.
Yeah, and like I remember calling Martavis Bryant, like Sigmund Bloom calling him the alien back in the day. And Watson definitely has some of that, right? The after catch stuff. And by the way, when I say people, I mean it's like just Josh Norris. So, nothing important when it comes to that. The other people making the Martavis comparison.
He had a rough mock draft this year.
You can't win them all. But with Christian Watson, yeah, I think he's got great in space ability. He's really freaky after the catch, and he can definitely burn you deep. I mean, you look at his route success rate chart, 9 routes really high, post route, corner route, deep outs. He can do a little bit like on the flat route, like getting out into space. He's got a pretty good understanding of leverage out there. He's in order to be like a true number 1 receiver, I think he's got to get better on like base NFL routes. He's got to be better against man coverage on slants. He's got to be better, working those like backside digs. But so I'm kind of like, I don't know if he's ever going to be a traditional number 1 high volume receiver. But I do think like when he gets touches, it's going to be, big time stuff. So he's a guy that I've sort of struggled to rank this year just because there are questions obviously about the situation in terms of how good he is. I'm sort of kind of in the middle there, and where I think he might be like a really volatile number 2, maybe not like a traditional number 1.
Yeah,
I struggle to rank him too. I mean, I keep kind of moving him around in the same tier with like Treylon Burks but I mean, when you think about it though, I mean, he has a chance to be like the clear cut number 1 receiver. I mean, we're in Green Bay. We're talking about Romeo Dobbs, Jayden Reed, and then, a whole lot of nothing. I mean, in that receiver core. So, I've struggled to rank him too, and I've gotten very little of him in drafts.
Yeah, my take is that I think the Packers are going to try to be extremely run heavy, and that doesn't mean that Christian Watson can't still hit in that. It doesn't mean they'll be able to execute that. So yeah, I've been taking McLaurin over Christian Watson. I've been taking Drake London over Christian Watson. I do take Christian Watson over DJ Moore, though, which I believe Evan disagrees with, but I do take Christian Watson over DJ Moore for this.
Speaking of DJ Moore, do you have any takes on him, Harmon?
I'm actually just working through my projections right now, and that's never going to be like kind when you're doing your projections coming off the Bears offense. Right. But I think DJ Moore, just real quick on him, I think he is like a top 20 NFL receiver. But, the easy comparison is like the A.J. Brown trade or the Stefon Diggs trade. These were guys that were putting up like top 5 success rate versus man press numbers in their prior stops in Minnesota, in Tennessee for A.J. Brown. Like I thought those guys were elite individual players, and then there were just issues with their surroundings. And then obviously when they go to their new places, all things kind of come together and they put up those elite seasons. I think DJ Moore is a tick or 2 lower of an individual player, but there's no doubt in my mind that he's a true number 1 receiver. And I think he can help Justin Fields in 2 distinct ways. We've seen DJ Moore be like a true vertical X receiver at different points in Carolina. And then I think he was kind of underutilized as a yards after catch player in the, bogus like Matt Rule staff. I think that Norv Turner did a lot of that stuff when they first drafted DJ Moore, and I think he could be really good for the Green Bay Packers kind of offshoot offense that Luke Getsy's running there in Chicago. So I think it's gonna be a huge help for Justin Fields. I haven't found myself like really eager to draft him this year though.
All right, let's keep moving to the Pittsburgh guys here. Diontae Johnson, everybody makes fun of. He's like the poster boy of being pathetic at yards per target, at scoring touchdowns. That stuff can be very, very noisy. So I'm curious on your take on Diontae Johnson. And then also, I wanted to get the George Pickens take. I was really low on George Pickens, lower than most people, because just his route tree. Like, if you're just going to ask a guy to run straight for 40 yards down the field on every play, it's going to be really hard to be a consistent fantasy performer. You're going to have some big games, but it's really hard to be consistent in that way. What are your thoughts, Matt, on Diontae Johnson and George Pickens?
Yeah, you guys know I love Diontae Johnson. I'm a big fan of him as a route runner. I'm a big fan of the way he separates at all three levels. I hate the offense, though. It's easily my least favorite offense in the NFL. It's very simplistic. It's like I always call it like a high school offense. And particularly,
I can't believe they brought back Matt Canada, by the way. I mean, seriously.
Diontae Johnson would have been a steal and a smash if they had just changed their coordinator, like, period.
And I kind of think Pickens, who's a little bit more of a difficult evaluation, we can touch on him further, but I kind of would have been even more in on George Pickens too. I understand you don't want to change coordinators on a young quarterback, and Pickett started showing some good stuff towards the end of the year, but the route concepts and the route combinations in this offense, with the league playing so much too high safety now and so much cover 2 now and so much zone coverage, when you're just running a bunch of go routes and you're running Diontae Johnson and George Pickens are both super high in terms of just the amount of go routes that they ran last year. They also run all these hitch routes, these short little comebacks. I mean, just if you think about the shell of a too high, cover 2 defense, you're running right into those zones. So and even if the guy is open, they can be a inherently low percentage throw. Those routes are designed to beat man coverage, and the league is playing less man coverage than ever now. So it's really difficult, but I do think Diontae is a guy who he earns those targets. He gets open. He's a consistent separator. I think he's gotten really good about correcting the drop problem. Unfortunately, he's got another bad habit of running backwards when he's trying to get yards after catch. He's a very just kind of he's really high on the success rate versus coverage standpoint, but he's also really high on the boneheaded play metric as well. So I really still like Diontae a lot, and I do draft a good bit of him because I think this offense, in spite of Matt Canada, can take a step. And then George Pickens is he's difficult to me because I think I really like him as a player, and his ability to beat press coverage and get off the line is impressive. But he's another guy with a low success rate versus zone, kind of an average success rate versus man. He's not really a true separator. I think he's got a good understanding of leverage, and he's actually kind of, in a weird way, he doesn't separate a ton, but he's a good crafty route runner. The problem is, again, these low separation guys, really great contested catch receivers, they're kind of on the Devontae Parker axis of players. And those guys, to me, I think always tend to get a little bit overrated. So now that the steam on Pickens has kind of come down a little bit, I'm okay drafting him around where he goes correct me if I'm wrong, but wide receiver 40-ish. I'm totally fine there. I'm totally fine where Diontae goes. I think Diontae should go ahead of Pickens, but it's just the offensive coordinator is tough.
I've been on the clock a lot, and my choices are Diontae Johnson, Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, Marquise Brown. I've been taking Marquise Brown mostly in that spot, but Matt may have me convinced to mix in some Diontae Johnson here a little bit into that range.
I mean, Diontae Johnson, just on sheer touchdown regression, the dude didn't score a single touchdown last year.
Yeah.
Let me ask.
Got a couple 2-point conversions though, so he can catch in the end zone.
And this is embarrassing, but I have a decent percentage of Allen Robinson on underdog right now. Just take the hell on. I mean, apparently they're moving him into the slot, and they're going to revitalize his career. What do you think, Matt Harmon?
Well, you're talking to the right guy about this. Obviously, I was so wrong on what was going to happen with Robinson last year. I don't think a lot of us saw the Rams completely collapsing from an offensive line standpoint. But I wish I had given a little more credence to Robinson losing some juice in his legs, even in his final year with the Bears. And, I talked to several people that thought he would actually be a better fit as a slot receiver last year. And, the one thing I wish I hadn't bought into was the Sean McVay selling a bill of goods about, we're going to mix up Allen Robinson's role. But they just ran him out, Evan, exclusively as an X receiver, facing physical press man coverage on the outside. When they, and I've started to go back and look at Robinson's season last year, I've got a few games sampled, and when they started to move him around a little bit, he had a little more success. He's obviously a guy that's dealt with a ton of lower body injuries, so who knows where he is from a physical standpoint. But I'm with you, buddy. Like you get to the 17th, 18th round, and he's still there. And I think he is.
I mean, he goes undrafted sometimes.
Oh yeah, he goes 20th round. 20th round on DraftKings, you can get him usually.
Yeah, and I think he is a much better fit. Like nobody wants to hear, but he's a much better fit being a big slot receiver with the Steelers offense than he was as like the Rams true X receiver.
Well,
I think, and I missed on that too.
And I'm sure that you remember, but one of the very few smart things that Matt Nagy did in Chicago was he wasn't necessarily a full-time slot receiver, Allen Robinson, when he was with the Bears, but like when he was in the slot, like the ball was going to go to him. They kind of used him a little bit like Michael Thomas at times. And I mean, he had some really big games, really big seasons for the Bears.
All right.
Yeah, like you just look at those. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. We don't have to go too much deeper on Allen Robinson. Probably that's the last thing anybody wants to hear about from me. But no, I'm with you that was actually like in breaking routes too with Mitch Trubisky was some of the best work he did.
I want to go back up to the top. Christian Kirk had, or at least the middle top. Christian Kirk had an awesome year last season. Now he faces competition from Calvin Ridley. Is Christian Kirk an alpha that is going to earn targets at the expense of Calvin Ridley? Because that's really my concern. I want to be in on Christian Kirk, but I don't want to run into a situation where Christian Kirk is suddenly like the clear B behind Calvin Ridley.
I think there is some risk of that because Calvin Ridley at his peak was just so good. And obviously we're talking about a year and a half ago. It's been a while with Calvin Ridley, but and I know people go back to the 2020 season, but I mean, he is exactly what the Jaguars needed last year, which is a guy that's going to win against press man coverage from that X receiver position. Even if he's not the biggest player, he's going to separate really well there. So I think there's a chance of that, but I also I like Christian Kirk a lot. I'm a big Christian Kirk fan, especially his ability against zone coverage and to be like that vertical slot receiver. Like you look at his route charts, even from his time in Arizona, he's not just like a little pop gun slot receiver. And we saw that last year with Trevor Lawrence. Like he was a guy who could get open on dig and out routes from the slot. Like the one thing, Adam, because I hesitate with the projection with this team too, I do think they could be pretty concentrated, a lot like the Eagles offense last year, where they're feeding a 1A, they're feeding a 1B, they're feeding a tight end, Quez Watkins / Zay Jones. They're going to get like probably a few more targets than we think, but like somewhere between 50 to 60. I don't think they're going to throw to the running backs because I think Urban Meyer catfished us all about Travis Etienne's receiving ability with that draft pick and everything. So if the ball's really just going to those three guys with a little sprinkling of Zay Jones, I think there's enough targets to be in on Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk because both of those guys are really good players. For sure. Yeah. And we have Christian Kirk 6 spots ahead of ADP. But Christian Kirk's ADP is 13 spots behind Calvin Ridley. We're slightly behind on Calvin Ridley and slightly ahead on Kirk. I'm a little surprised the gap is so wide, the 13 spot gap between Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk right now in ADP.
I also have Christian Kirk ahead of Calvin Ridley. I remember Greg Cosell talking about of NFL films, and he talks to coaches, around the league and stuff. They come watch tape with them at NFL films. And there were coaches in the league that during the 2019-2020 seasons, thought that Calvin Ridley was the best receiver in the NFL. Yeah. I mean, I know that sounds hyperbolic, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but there were coaches in the league that thought that.
Yeah. Yeah. He hasn't played football in so long. I mean, suspension, injury, I'm excited to see him. I mean, it's been a really long time since we saw Calvin Ridley. Okay.
Playing $1,500 in parlays cost him $11.1 million. Yeah.
Not great. Not great. But yeah, he was very Stefon Diggs in reception perception in his 2018 to 2021 seasons.
All right. We'll go to one that's been controversial here in ETR. Evan has been lower than market on Jordan Addison. As a unit, a lot of us have been in on Jordan Addison just because my main take on Jordan Addison is Adam Thielen ran an incredible amount of routes last season and was so unproductive on them. If you give Jordan Addison those routes, it's really hard for him to fail, I think. Now, will he earn those routes or will KJ Osborne play more, et cetera, et cetera? I'm not sure. Matt, what say you on Jordan Addison's ability to step right in as a week 1 playmaker for the Vikings?
I mean, he's not having the cleanest offseason in the world, which is, a little concerning for a guy we want to, step in right away. But And I say, Adam, I know you and I are both dog guys, but still 140 and a 55. I don't know about that. Anyways, in terms of him as a player, I think he is definitely a guy that profiled as a pro-ready receiver. 71.3% success rate versus man, 80% success rate versus zone. Not really a good press coverage beater, not really a guy that was going to win vertically. Like, he really struggled at USC, especially when they would line him up as an X receiver and he'd have to like try to stack guys and win on go routes on the outside. He was straight up just not good at that, in my opinion. I also thought he was, not a great tackle breaker in space. He just profiled as a very like a poor man's Jahan Dotson, which I know sounds like an insult, but I'm a big Dotson fan. So that sounds really bad when you say it like that.
That's the comparison that I made as well, was to Jahan Dotson, who's like, I mean, a mid-range to low-end number 2 receiver in the NFL, right?
I don't know. I like Dotson a lot more than that, but I think but from a stylistic standpoint, those two guys are very similar. Now, he's all the things I said he struggles with, he's not going to have to do a ton of, because he is, like Kevin O'Connell said, he's going to get a ton of easy looks playing across from Justin Jefferson, who you don't need me to tell you, but you should at least read his RP profile because it's full of a lot of really good stuff. But I think with Jordan Addison, I struggle to see a little bit of like the ceiling as a player, but I do think he's really kind of safe as a pro from a skill set standpoint. I have been like more interested in drafting TJ Hawkinson at tight end than I have been at Jordan Addison at wide receiver. It's not really a ton to do with Jordan Addison's game. It's just I think the ceiling of a player is a little bit like mystery ridden with Jordan Addison.
Okay, sounds like Harmon is slightly on Silva's side there on Jordan Addison. I did want to get the Gabe Davis take. We should have done it when we gave the Steph Diggs take, but I think Gabe Davis last year, like, it didn't take rocket science. I mean, the dude ran a ton of routes in the most pass-happy offense in the league with Josh Allen as quarterback, and he still came up short. Now, I want to be clear. Not only did Gabe Davis deal with an ankle injury for much of last year, Josh Allen had the elbow injury, which we also talked about, and still Gabe Davis finished higher in points per game than he's going this year. You see what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it was the worst possible run out for Gabe Davis last year, or one of the worst possible run outs, and he's still being drafted below where he finished last year. So I think there's room there for him just to run a little bit better, be a little bit healthier. But I think everybody is coming around to your opinion now, Matt, that he's just not good enough to be a star. What did you think about Gabe Davis last season, his outlook going forward?
Well, the good thing is this year you don't have to buy into him being a star. You just have to buy into him being a starting X receiver. And I think he's not really a true number 2. He's kind of on that like MVS bucket of vertical inconsistent X receivers, but he has a clear, I mean, all the guys they added this year, Kincaid, even if Khalil Shakir, who I like, steps up, they add Hardy, they add Trent Sherfield. None of those guys are vertical X receivers. And like, here's the deal with Gabe Davis. I think I said on the show last year, I liked being a centrist on Gabe last year, like being around wide receiver 30. I didn't want to push him up into like the, low 20s or the high teens like he was getting, but I also didn't want to think like, I don't want you to look at his route chart and see that he can't run a lot of short and intermediate routes and think he sucks. He just has to have a specific role. And that is as a field stretcher. Like, he's good at stretching the field. He's good he's not got the greatest hands, but he can win in tight contested situations. And that does overlap. All of the analysis last year stands that it overlaps really well with Josh Allen. We actually just added at receptionperception.com, we added Derek Klassen doing quarterback data charting for us. He's done great work charting quarterbacks for years, and he's putting up, he's a sicko like me and watching all that film, and he actually is still in his youth. He's younger than me, so he's still got his youthful days ahead of him, but he's doing this quarterback charting for us. And I actually posted Josh Allen's data chart from Derek Klassen with Gabe Davis's route chart. I just posted this on Twitter last night, and it just does overlap so cleanly with where Josh Allen throws those low percentage, high degree of difficulty throws, and where Gabe Davis does have really high success rate on 9 routes, corner routes, and out routes. I think that you don't have to buy into him being the player that people thought he was last year, which obviously I did disagree with.
I've been taking so much Gabe Davis, man. I feel like it's like if he misses, it's a small miss. Like, last year went about as bad as it can possibly go, and he's still, finished in the top 40 among wide receivers. So yeah, I like being in on Gabe Davis. Evan, any further thoughts there?
Last year he was like a 3rd or 4th round pick, and this year he's like a 7th or 8th round pick. maybe even ninth in some instances. I think one of the key takeaways from what Harmon broke down there was that Gabe Davis has a certain skill set that is unique to the Bills pass catcher core, and therefore he like has a secure role. I mean, he's going to be out there running routes, and he's going to be out there playing 85% of the snaps in one of the most prolific offenses in the league, sort of like MVS, you know what I mean? And I mean, obviously MVS is much cheaper. Actually, I have a ton of MVS at this point in best ball. But yeah, I mean, that's something that you can bank on. Like Gabe Davis is going to be out there in one of the best offense in the league.
Exactly. Okay. I want to roll through some cheaper guys here who I think are interesting. It gets to me in the draft a lot. And the last remaining actual number one wide receiver is JuJu Smith-Schuster. And beyond JuJu Smith-Schuster and ADP, there is not a lot of bankable volume. I personally think there's a lot of bankable volume for JuJu. Failing with Patrick Mahomes, though, like makes me queasy. And now he goes to Mac Jones. Is JuJu just not good enough? Was that season in Pittsburgh a stone cold mirage? Dude is still really young.
Yeah, I mean, it was 100% a mirage for JuJu. I think at that point, I remember calling him like the most overrated receiver in the NFL. But now I kind of think he's underrated. He's really good at beating zone coverage. He's really good at winning on like short and intermediate routes. He just can't really play outside consistently, and he can't really beat man coverage. I would actually kind of like, I know he ended up not being a great fantasy pick without much of a ceiling. And I was kind of hoping he would have more of a ceiling because of the strengths, but I think he was a good real life player for the Kansas City Chiefs last year. And I think he can kind of be a good real life player for the New England Patriots. Obviously with fantasy, there's a ton of questions about that offense, but if he's healthy, which is a question, I mean, I think Jacoby Myers is a better player than JuJu Smith-Schuster because he can beat man coverage and press coverage more than JuJu, but he should slide right into that role and be pretty valuable there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been taking JuJu a bunch. We're 19 spots ahead of ADP on JuJu. He's going like 130th overall, and to me, he's the clear-cut favorite to lead the Patriots in targets. The other late-round guy that I've been taking is Nico Collins. To me, if you think that quarterback play is going to take a big step forward, and I do think quarterback's play is going to take a big step forward, and you think Nico's going to be an every down player, he's pretty cheap. Is he good enough is a question I have for Matt.
I'm a big fan of what Nico Collins has shown through the first couple years of his career, and I think he actually and I say big fan. Like, I don't think he's a future superstar or anything like that, but I think he's on that same axis of X receivers that we've talked about. The guys that are going to just be stuck on the line of scrimmage and probably run against a ton of press man coverage. I think he's shown enough to be kind of like a poor man's T. Higgins. That might be a little more exciting than a poor man Jahan Dotson. But 71% success rate versus man last year, 74.5% success rate versus press. This guy started games with Kyle Allen last year. I mean, come on. Now we're getting him with CJ Stroud, who I know is a rookie, but is much more adept at hitting those like in-breaking vertical routes that Deco's really good at. He can get him in contested situations. I struggle to not draft Nico Collins like every single time in the double-digit rounds. There's a lot of double-digit round receivers that I think are better than kind of like they've got a ceiling to them, like an underrated ceiling as players, but I think he is number one on that list. And
it's another situation where Nico Collins' skill set is unique within the confines of the Texans wide receiver core. I mean,
100%.
John Mechie is his comparison coming out of school was often to Robert Woods, who they also have. And then Tank Dell, they want to play him outside, but he weighs 165 pounds. They've got Noah Brown. So Nico Collins is the only big, long guy who can really, really run in that pass catcher core. And I think that gives him some safety in terms of his role security.
All right. Last question I had here was on Packers depth, Romeo Dobbs versus Jayden Reed. There's a lot of Romeo Dobbs fans out there, man. You can't say anything bad about Romeo Dobbs without people getting really, really angry. He was, by a lot of metrics, one of, if not the worst wide receivers in the entire NFL last year. They used a second-round pick on Jayden Reed. My initial thought was to be really high on Jayden Reed. There's been, rhetoric out of camp that Jordan Love's favorite target is Romeo Dobbs, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, man. There's like weird obsessions with this guy going on. What did you see out of Romeo Dobbs last year, Harmon?
I mean, he looks like he could play in the NFL, and as a day 3 draft pick, that's great, but I don't see any like special ceiling with Romeo Dobbs. 5th percentile success rate versus man, 9th percentile success rate versus press. He can win sort of downfield. He's another guy that just dropped a ton of passes last year. I don't kill guys for drops very often, but I could see why Aaron Rodgers got pretty frustrated dealing with some of these guys last year. I think he sort of stands out from like Christian Watson and Jayden Reed, but I'm a big fan of Jayden Reed. I really liked him a lot. He's got like shades of Terry McLaurin to his game. And Terry McLaurin, I think, is a top 10 receiver in the NFL. So, if he gets like a few more tweaks to him, Jayden Reed, I think he could be a slot flanker for this team, maybe even play a little bit at X, but like, I think the Packers probably should, if they're playing 2 receiver sets, like, and Jayden Reed can do it, I think he'd be a better fit there than Romeo Dobbs.
Okay. Before we get out of here, I want to allow Matt to get off his chest some narratives that are out there that he disagrees with. And so everybody has takes about players, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure Matt disagrees. He sent me 3 here. I'll tee you up for each one here, Matt. First one is a guy I'm glad to see you high on. I like this guy. I always thought change of scenery made sense. Elijah Moore is now on the Browns. I believe you like him way more than market. Is that true?
100%. Big Elijah Moore fan. I think change of scenery is great. I think Amari Cooper quietly had his best season last year as an NFL player. And I also think it wasn't even close. Like, I think that was clearly his best year.
You've always kind of been thrown shade at Amari Cooper a little bit.
Yeah. I think he has been less so, but similar to what I said about Jerry Judy. Ironically, they play at the same school. Like, I think he's a volatile, inconsistent player. But last year, career high success rate versus man press. And he did it while playing out at X receiver too, which I think a lot of like the play action and the in-breaking routes they had him running were just a much better fit than Dallas kind of having him be sort of like an off-ball flanker guy. And it's some of the routes they had him run more of a vertical threat. I think they just used Cooper really well, but I also think Cooper just I don't know about his effort or anything like that people question, but he was just really dialed in and very consistent last year when he's normally not. And I think with Elijah Moore, I think he could be a better pro at some point than Amari Cooper if he hits his ceiling, because he's that good at beating press man coverage. And he could be a guy that plays in the slot. He could play flanker. We've seen him be a good NFL player in his rookie year. So, I think he's just a guy that I want to draft a ton of this year. Elijah Moore, I think he's very good. He's
expensive, man. A lot of people share your opinion. I mean, he goes in the top 100, even though they have Amari Cooper, even though they have Donovan Peoples-Jones, even though they have David Njoku, even though you have weather concerns late in the year in Cleveland, even though Deshaun Watson was so bad last year, Elijah Moore still goes in the top 100. So, yeah, he's expensive, but, I certainly like Elijah Moore. Second guy here, Skyy Moore. This one is interesting, especially in the wake of Kadarius Toney's latest knee surgery. Kadarius Toney showing a complete inability to be on the field. There was reports during OTA season that Skyy Moore was penciled in as the slot receiver for the Chiefs this year, which is going to make it move a little bit. The profile of rookies who fail in the way that Skyy Moore did is not great for them to succeed in year 2 and year 3. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's not great. Sounds like you think, though, could see a year 2 breakout from Skyy Moore.
Yeah, first of all, on Kadarius Toney, I was all out on Toney even before this injury, just because we have no evidence that he can be talking about a wide receiver 1. He's never shown that ability at Florida in his year with the Giants or last year. Certainly not a consistent press man route runner. And by the way, the fact that he's not good at running routes and the fact that he gets hurt all the time and the fact he's beefing with Giants fans on Twitter, I don't think that it's a very old man yells the clouds thing to say. But I think there's a connection between all 3 of those. And with Skyy Moore, though, I know there's obviously the face planter theory and all that stuff with receivers in their rookie year. But when there's a good reason why the guy didn't produce as a rookie, I think you can kind of write it off. And there's a very good reason why Moore didn't play a ton last year. This is a guy coming from Western Michigan, going to an Andy Reid offense. That is moving to a new country, learning the language, buying a house, learning to drive on the right side of the road. That's just a complete flip in language there. It's a big learning curve. And like we talked about JuJu earlier, and I think this is part of the analysis too, that the role that Skyy Moore has to play in the NFL, and they tried him at a lot of different spots last year, kind of letting him learn on the job. They let him play a little bit. Like when you look at his profile, they had him play X, they had him play slot, they had him play Z, and I think that's kind of a good sign for him that they're getting his feet wet at every spot. But the role he projects best is as a flanker slot receiver, which is the role JuJu is playing for them last year. And again, I think JuJu is not trash. Like he's an established NFL veteran that, you know, is going to get the veteran deference. And I don't think he like did anything to lose the job last year either. So now that he's gone, I think the runway's clear for Skyy Moore, who I don't know that he has a top 20 ceiling with Kelsey there and the way they spread that thing around. But I think he can outkick his ADP by a decent bit and be like a breakout receiver, you know, however you want to quantify that.
Yeah. I mean, he goes around Nico Collins, Allen Lazard. You know, he goes like in that range. I want to be taking shots on Skyy Moore. He's getting more expensive now in the wake of Kadarius Toney's injury. I wish I had started taking Skyy Moore shots earlier, I think. Last one on Matt's list that he likes more in the market is one that, well, Evan is going to be excited about. Tyler Lockett is on Matt Harmon's list here as likely more than market.
This has been Matt Harmon's deal for like 6 years.
Yes.
So.
And it's been very profitable. Now, Matt, though, he is going to face more competition, I think, than he's seen with the presence of JSN now there. What do you think about Tyler Lockett maintaining his ability? Well, how old is he now? He's got to be getting close to 30.
He's in his 30s, I think.
This is his 31 season.
Yeah.
Yeah, Evan's right that I've been I was high on Tyler Lockett when it was like too early to be high on Tyler Lockett, you know, back in like 2016.
Yeah, I remember because you were super high on him, and then he kind of had a little bit of a disappointing season, or I don't know. And then like you wound up being right the year after, you know, and then the 5 years after that, the half decade after that.
Yeah, I'm hoping like Ayuk is another one like that. There's another guy that I love that had a, you know, the doghouse situation. Hope he continues to develop. I think that guy's like a superstar in the league. But Tyler Lockett, like the thing, we're talking about guys like Keenan Allen. We're talking about like guys like DeAndre Hopkins that, you know, Hopkins not as much, but like these receivers that have been, Allen Robinson too, these receivers that have been great the last decade, showing the early signs of decline. I think Lockett had his best season last year. He had his best success rate versus man coverage, 78.9%, which by the way, it's like a 95th percentile score. I mean, it's incredibly high, 95th, 96th percentile in RP history. Last year, his best score of his career. He wins at all 3 levels. Like I think he's been the best receiver on that roster, even with DK Metcalf. And I'm a big DK Metcalf fan, but I think he's been the better player. That he's been like a top 10 real life NFL receiver. And I could get like why they draft a first round receiver. They still have DK Metcalf. But Lockett has shown no signs of decline at this point. He's just been getting better, and you know he's faster. He's more explosive, even I think now. To me, there's as much risk with DK Metcalf losing target totals to JSN, who I'm a big fan of JSN too. I just think this is like going to be an offense to draft this year. Like I want to draft any of these guys, and that includes Tyler Lockett because he goes so late. Yeah,
I mean. Who do you take when you're on the clock, Lockett or JSN? Because they go pretty close to each other. Lockett goes a little bit earlier.
Lockett.
Yeah,
I definitely Lockett for me.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else you want to ask about, Evan, before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered. Well, I'll throw out Rashee Rice. Did you look at him at all?
I did. Yeah. His RP
seems to be like really polarizing to me.
Yeah, probably a lot of my subscribers don't like Rashee Rice. But yeah, here's the thing though, and I've said this about him. I think I know for a fact, like when I put out the sample, you know, somebody hit me up. It's like, hey, by the way, he was like playing with like a foot injury through that entire sample. So like, just keep that in mind. So his profile is not great. I kind of think we'll see if he plays this year, right? Because he's another guy coming from a small school to an Andy Reid offense. But I think he actually fits best. I know they've talked about him as like a slot receiver. I think he fits best in like the MVS role because I think he can stretch the field and I think he can win down the field. Like that's really the best stuff that he's going to do. If he's a little more consistent as a separator downfield and a little more consistent as a player in contested situations, like I think he could be MVS plus in like 24 and 25.
All right. We've reached the Rashee Rice portion of the program, which means it's time to get out of here. Matt, this was awesome. Tell the people where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, I guess, at Matt Harmon _BYB. And you know, more importantly, please check out receptionperception.com. Reception Perception, the show, is the podcast that James Coe and I do. I think if you're still curious about it, like, check that out. And you know, I think you'll really like what we got going on there. But 3 tiers of subscriptions on the site. There's something for everybody. If you like wide receivers, I promise you're not going to get better wide receiver information anywhere else, or at least not anybody that's putting as much time and man hours behind that position.
Yes, and for the guys who were in-season subscribers to ETR last year, we did a little project with Matt where he looked at some receivers we thought were interesting for the first few weeks and gave his initial takes on them for trading and DFS and stuff like that. Hopefully we'll be able to get that worked out for this year as well. Stay tuned for more information on the in-season package. Okay. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at Adam Levitan, at Evan Silva, at Establish the Run. All one word. Don't let the FUD scare you out there, man. Twitter remains the best place in the world for information. And that's what we need. We need information. No more.
I'm not scared.
I've had enough of the Twitter FUD.
What's Twitter?
Yeah. X.
Oh, it's X now, right? Yeah.
Okay. Anyways.
Subscribe to me on X. I mean, it sounds weird to say.
All right. Thanks to Matt for being here. For Harmon, for Evan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.